Andrew, happy birthday.
Thanks, man. It's July 12th when we're recording this. It's my birthday. It's my birthday. Half dip burpity.
Hap dip burpity.
I love it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Florida Band Podcast. You know why you're here. This is Florida Band. My name is Christian Gordon. I'm one of the band directors at Westglades Middle School in Parkland, Florida.
And I'm Andrew Lopez. I am the band director at Coniston Middle School in West Palm Beach, Florida.
Hey, so you know,
insert
his
name
older brother
here.
was in my band.
Yeah.
And every day that we would wish somebody a happy birthday online, he would type in the chat something like that.
I love it.
Like hip dip barbity or something like that.
I love it.
So that's really funny.
Well, I woke up this morning and Marissa was just like, "Hap dip burpity," and I'm like, it was good. Yeah, man.
What a great wake-up call.
Yeah, no, it was great. I got a bunch of text messages, and I texted my twin brother. He hasn't gotten back to me. He lives on his own schedule, so he'll probably wake up in like 2 hours.
Right. But we had a good hang.
Yeah.
We had a good hang yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
For your birthday.
Yeah, it was us, Marissa, Kaylin, Tiffany Cox from Lake Worth, and just a couple friends. Had you met Michelle at Dillard yet?
No.
Yeah, they like, there was a lot of new people that I've never seen, but they're like, "Yeah, we've been here for years," and I'm like,
yeah,
okay.
That was kind of strange, kind of hiding in their little bubble.
Well, I mean, like, it's COVID's fault.
So we
honestly.
invited them out. Yeah. It's COVID is everybody's scapegoat. It's even mine. I'll admit it.
It's a thing. No, but it was good to hang and be with everybody.
Had paddle boards and jet skis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we fell over.
Lots
too
of
many
food.
times.
Yeah, that was funny.
Well, I was talking to Greg, and he's like, "Hey, man," because I was like, "Hey, why is it on with this person I fell over and with this person I fell over?" And he was saying that it depends on the weight distribution, and that if the larger person is on the back, when the jet ski is still, it becomes like exponentially more unstable. I see. So when we were driving, had you been in the front, it would have been cool.
Right. So you're calling me fat.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm just kidding.
Mm-hmm.
But no, it was cool. I think the highest I got on the jet ski, I spent like an hour on there at one point. Because every time I would bring somebody in, they're like, "We want to go," and I was like, "Oh my god." And I think the fastest I went was with Marissa. We went like 45, almost 50. But then Greg went 65, like right off the bat. He went full bore.
I couldn't even imagine going that fast on a jet ski.
Yeah, it was terrifying.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, but yeah, man, it was good. And then for your birthday, what did we do again? We ate a lot for a long time.
We had about a 24-hour binge.
Yeah.
My birthday was July 6th, so 6 days ago.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm already past my... How old are you now? 28?
I'm 28.
I'm 32 now. And let's see. Yeah, we had Chinese, we had Mexican, we had synonym rolls.
Yeah, the cinnamon rolls. We didn't go to TB. We didn't go to Taco Bell.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
And then it was good. I enjoyed it. We watched Brink and we watched High School Musical.
We sure did.
Oh my God.
I was just basically reliving my childhood. I'm trying to just stay young, feel young. So, had some of my favorite childhood foods and like peanut butter on waffles with syrup, Pepsi Blue. Mm-hmm. That's back apparently.
Yeah.
So that was delicious. But yeah, we just hung out, played some video games,
chilled. Then
met up with some people. Casa Tequila. The go-to
in Coral Springs. Well, it's also because we knew that we were gonna go ham for my birthday. So
yes,
we can't die twice in 7 days.
Yes, we can.
I guess we could. You're not wrong.
We could.
But should we?
Yeah. Ended up not dying as much as we thought we would yesterday.
For sure.
At least not from alcohol. It was mostly from the sun, and the heat.
Well, it was good.
Yeah.
And then we actually, hopefully, we recruited a new editor. If they stick, we'll definitely make a point to introduce him and give him those credits. But yeah, so we're expanding the team, and it's only episode like 8 or 9.
Something like that. Yeah.
We're doing great.
Speaking of episode, this is going to be our instrument draft / instrument placement episode, and the reason there's a slash is because Andrew and I do it 2 different ways, and so we're gonna kind of let each person talk through it, and as they talk through the process, the other person will just ask questions and maybe play like a little bit of devil's advocate, just to keep us on our toes and see if we can steal some ideas from each other, and then maybe the listeners can steal some things too.
Yeah, and in terms of continuity, this episode fits best directly after the fitting episode. So actually, this is episode 3. I forgot in the lineup.
Okay, yeah.
But this episode fits best after the fitting because the way we both do our fittings is pretty dang similar. But then depending on the makeup of your program and just your own personal opinions, if you want to steal these ideas, you can either take his or take mine, or make a combo of both. And see which one works best for you. So who wants to go first?
I could go first.
Sure.
And I'll also go first because I was going to add a thought. So
Go for it.
We're going to talk about instrument percentages, or how many of each instrument should you take every year.
I still have that file
Right?
pulled up, so let me pull
Okay.
that up. Yeah.
So I'll keep talking while I pull that up. I would say for a general rule for me, I'm looking at what I know the high school would need. So if my high school director says like they're short on double reeds or tubas or something, I always take that into consideration to recruit a little bit more for that instrument if possible. And then of course our own concert and symphonic band, what we might need going into next year. It takes maybe about an hour, but what you want to do is write down your 7th graders and your 8th graders, or your 2nd year and your 3rd year, whatever grade it is, and see what instrument is going to be graduating. So basically, if your top band has 3 tubas, 2 of them are 8th graders and 1 is 7th grade, you're going to want to recruit a little extra on the tuba side so that you can fill that section back up, for example. Depending on how you place students into bands, you always want to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That's a good rule of thumb. The way I do my draft, which we'll get into later, I typically my band's balance is always not. I'm not gonna say it's perfect because it's not. That's a lie. But there's always a good balance of what you need. I generally follow the FBA best practices percentages in terms of instrumentation as much as I can during my instrument selection. And typically I'll graduate, the good number. I will of course always consult. I'll be like, do you need more horns? The answer is always yes. Do you need more altos? The answer is always no. And try to like guide myself from there. But it's really, I'm a selfish man. I put my my instrumentation over the needs of my feeder. And maybe, depending on when it depends on who the feeder was. Things may change, but even my feeder George at Forest Hill, like he's never really had a problem. We've never had problems, and usually and he's always been really, really good about communicating what he needs, and I do my best to accommodate him. But I will say, my first priority is my own program. But I'm a very selfish man. It's my birthday. I'm allowed to be. But
hey, to each their own.
Yeah.
I would say for us, we look at the Habits of a Successful Middle School Band Director that was put out by Scott Rush and Emily Wilkinson and Jeff Scott.
It's a gold book.
And
I love that book. Literally, it's gold.
It's literally gold. Yes.
It's a gold book.
It's great. In fact, you mentioned once a year you go over best practices. Once a year I read that book.
And there you go.
And I actually read it over winter break.
Right.
Because I want to be fresh for MPA season. But anyway, that was just a side note. So I follow those percentages. They follow pretty closely the FBA best practices. So, it just comes down to personal preference. I think there's a slightly higher percentage on the double reeds and trumpets. That's strictly for attrition. And another thing you want to think about in terms of attrition is you want larger sections for certain instruments for switches. So for example, I know someone who does not start euphoniums, okay? And he said it was because it's an easy instrument to learn. So he only starts trombones, and he has 30 trombones in his beginning band and just gets students to switch after, which I think can be smart in some ways. But then another thing you want to consider is having extra clarinets in your section for switches to bass clarinet, and extra saxophones for switches to tenor and bari, things like that.
Yep.
But if you might be one of those directors that doesn't start horns, and so you want to start more trumpets for horn switches, or you don't start oboes, you want to start more flutes for oboe switches. Those are things that you might want to think about when you're picking your instrumentation.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have for instrumentation.
Well, for me, for instrumentation, it's definitely based off what you need. With the Florida band sound, it's always a more bottom heavy sound. So I definitely,
that is very true.
I definitely try to lean towards more tubas and more euphoniums and more trombones and more bass. Sometimes a band might only have like one, I might have two or three bass clarinets. If I can ever afford it, I've never had it, but I've always wanted to have like a second bari.
A second bari in your wind ensemble?
Yeah, I'm like two bari saxes. I've never been able to.
I will
swing
never
that.
put two.
I've never been
unless
able to
I have
swing
too
that.
many kids. Unless I have too many kids, I will not put two.
Sure, I know. I've never been able to do it because I've never had the numbers in other sections to justify the need to boost that balance. But
I would put more bass clarinet.
Oh yeah,
personally.
Sure, and then put them on the outside. Yeah, I mean, so you follow, just so everybody knows for reference, I have read Scott Rush's book, but I typically will just, because it's the first one that I found, and they're also really, really close, I'll usually follow the FBA Best Practices instrumentation guide, while Christian does follow the Scott Rush guide. Neither are wrong. It's just a matter of personal preference. And honestly, between the two of us, I think we can both say that we don't even really follow them exactly. They're just guides.
Right. All right, so I guess we'll go ahead and start talking about our instrument placements that we do at Westglades. And so we talked about at the fitting that students want to get as many fives as they can at our school when they're trying instruments. So at this point, all students have tried all the instruments. They've gotten as many fives as they can. On the score sheet, they put their first, second, and third choice after they've tried everything, because sometimes what they think is their first choice will end up changing if they end up not doing well when they try that instrument. And so once they're done, we ask them for their first, second, and third choice. This also doesn't include percussion. We want to set the instrumentation before we do percussion auditions, which would be the following day. All right, let's see. So once we have that, Kaylin and I sit down and we put everything in a database. And what we look at in the database is their first, second, third choice, first, last name. And if they're interested in trying out for percussion, we take a note of that. And we also have their summer listening survey scores off to the side as well. And so what we'll do first is a preliminary placement based on their first choice. And then we'll check student scores on the summer listening survey. If there's a distinct issue with their summer listening survey versus the instrument that's their first choice, we will immediately move them to their second choice. So for
you
example,
guys do this over the weekend, right?
No, we'll do it during the week.
Oh, okay.
Because we want it done by Friday.
Got it.
So students have the weekend to get their instruments.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, if a student does very poorly on the ear section of the summer listening survey, but they want to play trombone, we will either see if euphonium is their second choice and give them euphonium, or immediately just move them to their second choice and go from there. And then once we've gone through the summer listening surveys and we're still trying to keep as many students on their first choice as possible, then we look at how many of each instrument we want. And we do not do this by class period. So if we have 3 sections of beginning band, there's a chance that all the oboes that we end up placing are in first period, and the other 2 periods do not have any oboes. And that what you guys are going to notice is that's a distinct difference between how we do placements versus how Andrew does placements, which he calls the draft. So that's what we do. Now, if we end up having too many of a certain instrument, we'll consider if it's important enough to change somebody's first choice to their second choice. Because again, we do, even though we tell the students that getting their first or second or third choice is still really good out of 11 choices, we still try to give them their first choice because we know how children are. And so we want to make as many students happy as possible. But then we look at, is it important to decrease the number? So for example, saxophone. Having 1 or 2 more saxophones than you actually need in the overall band, it can be detrimental, because you don't want to constantly be telling the students to play softer, especially once they get into 7th or 8th grade. You want them to be able to be expressive on their instruments and not have to hold back. And so that's something that we consider. But if it's an instrument like clarinet and we end up having 3 more clarinets than we anticipated, and the 3 that are left, clarinet's their first choice, we have less of an issue giving those students clarinet. And so it is a balancing act, and it takes intuition. It takes knowing your students a little bit as well as you can at the beginning of the year. And at before we announce the instrumentation, we do the percussion auditions. And so regardless, sure.
How often do you get contestation? Because you are, even though you have, like, you're using their top 3 choices, so technically they have spoken for themselves in a sense. Is there contestation? So
yes, we do sometimes get parents or students that will say, I really don't want to play that. And, thankfully it's not many. It will probably be a handful or less. And that's simply because I believe it's because we prep them ahead of time mentally. Hey, today you might have joined band because you want to play the flute, even though you've never touched a flute. And you have no idea what it takes to play the flute. And once you try it, you might realize, you know what? I'm not good at this. I don't want to play it. We also tell them that we want them to be on the instruments that they're best at, so that they can feel and be successful in the class. What we don't want to happen is they end up on an instrument that they think they want to play, but they're not going to be successful at, or they're going to struggle with, and then they end up dropping the class.
So basically, like, at the end of your fitting, you kind of just give them like an oral terms of service agreement, and we do this from before the fitting. Okay. We're letting them know, we're prepping them ahead of time. Like, this might happen. You might walk in thinking, I'm going to be a flute player, and you run straight to the flute table, you're first in line, and you try your hardest, and you go back to flute because you can't get higher than a 3 or a 4. Right. You're trying to get that 5. It's just not happening. But you got to keep your options open, because maybe euphonium, like, you're nailing 5s on that thing. Sure. Or maybe you're nailing 5s on tuba. Like, you never know. It could be that situation. But the idea is at some point you're basically reading them the terms of service as, like, how the process goes, so that everyone walks in understanding, yes, I contribute to my fate, but my fate is up to the gods.
Actually, you bring up a good point, because and most students go in understanding that. We still have those students that they get a 3 and they put their first choice is what they got a 3 on. That still happens. But we do our best. But we actually tell them ahead of time, because what I was going to get into on the actual day that we play students is that it's Harry Potter themed. What we tell them ahead of time.
Look at you.
Yeah, what we tell them ahead of time is the wand chooses the wizard, the instrument chooses the musician.
Okay.
And so, it's not up to you necessarily what you're going to play. You can do your best to prepare for the fitting, but you just never know what's going to happen. The wand chooses the wizard. So, and they really like that idea. And then, so I was talking about percussion.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
Percussion, no problem. So percussion, well, did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, no, you're good. I was curious
Okay.
as to exactly how much investment they have in the process, but you're good.
Yeah, they're very invested.
Cool.
So, and they have the right mindset. So, All right, so we don't announce the instrumentations until after percussion auditions, okay? And so what we do is we do the percussion auditions, and which we talked about in the last episode. What kind of goes into that. It doesn't have to be too serious, but once we have the scores, we will take the top from the percussion scores and ask them, do you still want to do percussion? We don't tell them their score. We just ask them, do you still want to do percussion? Do you still want to, even after they've tried out? Because just like the fitting for the other instruments, they may try out on percussion and then go, you know what? I don't think I want to do that. I think I enjoyed blowing air through an instrument instead. And so we'll take the top scores and ask them. And then if there's any holes after that, we'll just keep going down the scores until we have our percussion section. And then on the day of the actual fitting, like I said, it's Harry Potter themed, and so I put on Harry Potter music that's like on a loop. It's like an hour loop of Harry Potter.
So it's like a mystery.
Yeah.
The kids
mystery.
walk in and they're like, oh God, I wonder what I got picked for. Like, oh God.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I'll turn off the lights. We'll turn off the light. Kayla and I will turn off the lights. We'll play Harry Potter music. We'll put up exactly.
Okay.
We'll put up like the Sorting Hat picture on the screen, and we'll set up the room so people know, like, they walk down the aisle up to the podium.
Yeah.
And when it's their turn, so we'll go down the list in every class, and the kids walk up. They sit on the chair on the podium. We put a trombone bell on their head as the Sorting Hat.
Adorable.
It is, right? They sit there and they're like, oh, I don't know, right? And they have to hold it on their head.
Oh, make that noise again.
No thanks. And I don't even know if I could, but and then we yell out their placement, and everybody claps for everybody. It's a positive environment, and that's what we do. And then of course we'll deal with if anybody's upset. So far, it's never been an issue where like somebody's crying or we get an angry call or anything. It's always been like, is it possible to still play like my first choice, or could I actually go to my second choice, something like that, or a parent will send an email. It's usually not an issue. So that's how we do our placements. So do you have any questions about that, Andrew?
No, I think it's pretty neat. I will say I do like that, despite, because there are some band directors who will do the placement, but then they won't make it engaging for the kids other than the reveal, but you make everything about it super engaging to where like everyone loves it, and it's very mysterious. I like Harry Potter. I'm not as big of a Harry Potter dork as others, but I definitely can appreciate the theatrics you put behind it, so that way the kids understand and walk in saying like, this is fun. I might be nervous and I might be really scared, but it's still really, really exciting.
Awesome, thanks. I will add one more thing, and we'll try to remember to talk about this in yours as well. Actually, you might not have the problem, but we do sometimes run into an issue where we don't have enough of a certain instrument, even after we've tried to place everybody and given them their second or third choice. What we don't do is try to give somebody their fourth choice.
Right.
And so we have to game plan and kind of see, as the weeks go on, who could possibly, after a month or so, do better on an instrument that we're lacking. It's usually trombone, like, that we can't get enough students on. And so we try to make it easy for them by offering a school-owned instrument that's way more affordable, or kind of Jedi mind tricking them into thinking trombone would be a better fit, things like that. So that's
Harold Hill him into the right instrument.
Harold who?
Harold Hill. You never seen Music Man?
Okay, it's been a long time. I should probably watch that.
That's my favorite musical. I love that musical.
Okay, next hang.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right, so it's your turn. If you don't have any more questions, so you do an instrument draft.
Yeah. Okay.
Can you kind of tell us where you heard about a draft? Because I've never heard of a draft until I got to Florida.
Sure. So I heard the draft idea I actually got from Mike Antman. I know we mentioned him a lot. We got to bring him on the show because we talk about him all the time.
For sure.
He's the whiz of our gen, man. But we so I was when I first became a teacher in Orlando. I heard about the draft idea from Mike. It was really from Marissa. Marissa told me what Mike does, and then I went and seeked out his assistant at the time, his associate, Charlene, and I saw her it was like back in 2015, and I saw her at the UCF Allstate Clinic, and I just tracked her down, and I was like, hey, because it was like the week right before fittings and draft, and like what became the draft. It was like the week right before that, like the second week of school, and I, as a first year teacher, I hadn't made any plans yet, so I was like, hey, tell me what you do. So what happens is it's very similar to yours, where the kids will do, through their fittings, they'll get their top 3 choices, and I'm very, very militant about, your top 3 choices only show up, you only get to decide them after the fitting is over. And I tell them, if I see, because I collect their cards just like you do, when they have their top 3 choices, because after they're done on the same piece of paper where they get their ratings, they also put their top 3. I collect their cards, and I tell them, if I see one of your top 3 choices and you got a 2 on that instrument, I'm gonna cross it out for you. Mind you, I say that, it never happens because they listen.
Right. No, but that's actually, I don't even bother checking. I need to check. Like when they hand them in, I need to just look at their top 3 and then take those top 3 and see what those scores are. And if they're 3s or 2s, I'm gonna say, let's talk about this.
I do my draft the very next day, so that night of the fitting is a very long night. I don't stay up crazy late, but I do make a point to look through. It takes a millisecond, but I just glance and I look at every single kid's card, because I don't care what their top 3 choices are. There are a couple kids, like if I remember this kid did really well on tuba, or this kid did really, really well on flute, I make sure that it's at least in their top 3, just to look, because I'm a nosy person.
Okay, so question though.
Yeah.
If you do the draft the very next day, what do you do for percussion?
Percussion is the same day as the draft. The kids, my students, will get they'll select or get they'll select / get selected for whatever wind instrument they want, and then they go to the percussion audition, and then
is that the same day?
That's the same day
as the fitting.
As the draft. So they get selected for their wind instrument first, and then after school, depending on how they do with their percussion audition, I'll have that conversation.
So then, does that ever leave any holes in your instrumentation?
Nope.
Lucky.
Yep.
I can foresee a small section, let's say horns, but like half of them that you placed on horns that day end up showing up to the percussion audition. What if that happens?
I mean, I tell them since it's a percussion audition and it's not a draft, like I've been known to fudge the numbers in their audition a little bit, but it's also, with multiple beginning bands, it balances itself out. Like if I've got a couple horns in period 1 and 2 of those 4 horns want to be percussionists, I'll probably have 4 other horns in another class, and then and not including the third class, I've still got at least 6 horns. So
okay, maybe I can follow, and I think it's because you place, well, you're going to talk about this, you basically spread out your instrumentation evenly amongst your beginning classes. So go ahead and continue.
So what I do is the night of the draft, like the night before the draft, when I've got all their fittings and I've read through their cards just to make sure that there's no mistakes, quote unquote, as in people didn't mark down, like everyone's top 3 makes sense. What I'll do is per class, I will, like, let's say I've got maybe 45 kids in one class, and I'll just use that 145 class for an example. So we've got 45 kids, and I'll go down and I'll do the math based off of the FBA best practices, and I'll say, okay, what is 45 times 0.12, and that's how many. And so sometimes I'll round up or I'll round down. So let me do the math real quick, just because I have my computer out. 45. What is 12% of 45? Where's my calculator? There it is. 45 times 0.12. 5. Okay, so if I have a class of 45, I'll usually end up with either 5, or if I need more flutes, I'll round up to 6. So sometimes I'll round down, sometimes I'll round up. But I'll do those also. Then if I want to have an oboe, I'll do 0.02, which is always 1. I'll do 0.24 times 45 for 24% is clarinets, 9% saxophones, 12% trumpets, 8% horns, 10% trombones, 4% euphoniums, 9% tubas. I usually fudge it to 10, and then 6% percussion. And I'll, depending on, I'm just the percentages are based out of 45 kids. And so, like, let's say in a class of 45 with 9%, I'll usually end up with about probably 4 tuba spots. And what I do is I create a draft board. Like, I'll make a giant Excel sheet, and I'll spruce it up, and I'll make a border and make it like super colorful, and it's really big and easy to look at, and I'll throw it on the smart board, and everybody can see it. And then what they do is when the kids, and the draft board is made of it's the number of spots per instrument. Just to reiterate, the number of spots per instrument is based on the percentages of FBA times however many kids you have in that particular class, and that's how you get your numbers. It's not going to be perfect. You might need to add a trumpet spot here or add a saxophone. Like we said in the fittings, since at the moment I don't fit oboes and bassoons, that's 6% that I can toss to other sections. So I'll usually give like 2% to the clarinets, so it's 26%, or I'll give 2% to the horns, so it's instead of 8%, it's 10%, and that usually will add a spot or two.
Okay.
So I'll fudge the percentages, but it still evens out, and I have that even, and I have a different draft board for every class based on the numbers. So the way I do it is I do end up with, as quote unquote, balanced instrumentation per class.
Right.
It's just easy for me to conceptualize, looking as you look, because when you how do I want to say it? As band directors, we're always looking towards the future, and it's a little bit easier just for me and the way my head works to conceptualize sections in the future when I can divide them out evenly like that. It works better for my head.
No problem.
But pedagogically, I want to make sure that I do even balance, because that way every section understands the importance of the clarinet. Every class understands the importance of the clarinet section, because in every class there's like 10 clarinets. And every class understands the importance of balancing to the tubas, because there's no classes where I have no tubas. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So because balance is one of the things that I teach right off the bat. I try to make sure that every student is listening and making sure that they have that. And you can't really teach balance if your balance is messed up, because you've chosen the route of grouping all of them together as a team. Like, it's hard for them to teach It's hard to teach a kid to listen to oboe if all your oboes in one class. I'm not saying that's the wrong way to do it, but it's just, with one method you get one advantage, with another method you get another advantage, and that's the advantage that you get from using balanced instrumentation for your beginning bands. So I'll create the draft board, and when the kids walk in, I blast like the Fox Sports. I'll blast it over, and I'll have like a football in my hand, and I'm not a big NFL person, but I just go for the aesthetic. But college football is the jam. But it'll be over the top obnoxious. And as the kids are coming in, we'll do the routine, and I'll have them like, okay, guys, make sure you have, as they come back to their seats, I pass out their scorecards, so they have their scorecards in hand, so that they remember what their top 3 are. But I tell them no pencils, so that way no one can make any changes. Typically the fittings are done in pen anyway. But so yeah, because that way you can avoid changes. Not saying I don't trust the kids, but I don't trust the kids. It's fine. So the kids will go back to their seats, and they'll have their scorecards, and I'll just be blasting the music, for the next 2 minutes, making sure everything's set up and ready to go. And then we'll talk about the fitting. I'll usually do a very quick reflection of did anybody have any surprises? Like, was there anything really cool that happened yesterday that you didn't think was going to happen? And kids will share it, and it's very positive. And then we'll start the draft. The way I do the draft is, it's a combination of, it really is the kids choose their instrument, but they choose it within the boundaries of instrumentation. And if there's any negotiating that needs to be done, it utilizes the tactic of peer pressure. So like, if you have a kid who for some reason ends up most likely choosing their third instrument, or let's say, for example, you try to draft a certain number of clarinets and you don't have enough, so you have to kind of haggle another kid into being a clarinet player. And obviously it's one of the 3 choices, right? You follow me so far?
Sort of. Go ahead and start with a section.
Okay. So what we'll do is I'll always start with the tubas. So when it's time for the draft, I'll say, okay, if tuba is your number 1 choice, stand up. And I've got 4 tuba spots out of the 45. And if 4 kids stand up, I will ask just very quickly. You got your tuba section, so congratulations. That's how I always end up with a bunch of tubas, because if what it is you keep asking questions until the correct number of kids stands up.
Okay, what if 4 did not stand up?
So let's say I say stand up if let me finish that scenario. So if I say stand up if tuba is your first choice and 4 kids happen to stand, and then I just very quickly be like, what'd you get? And if we got 5s, 4s, and maybe a couple 3s, okay, fine, no big deal. And then I go, and then I'll say, and like when the section is full, I'll go, congratulations, woo! And then I'll blast the music in, and like the kids will go crazy, and it's a lot of fun. I do that for every section. The second thing I do is once a section is complete, they come up and get their band folder. So it's like a big deal. It's like, you've been selected, come on down. And I pass out their band folders.
Okay, that's pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely want to steal that idea. When they come
like
up and get placed, give them something.
Yeah, they come up and then they with the Sharpie, like the folder says tuba on it, and it's got their technique builder, it's got a fingering chart, it's got a cup, like it's got I have a sheet of paper that's like a list of supplies that you need to get, and so that they can hand to the music store, and it's got a whole bunch of stuff in it, and then I let them write their name on it with a Sharpie, and then they go sit down. Now, it's super fun. If there's a kid who, let's say I say, okay, stand up if tuba is your first choice, and I have 4 spots and only 3 stand up, I'll say, okay, remain standing. Stand up if tuba was your second choice, and then certain number of kids stand up, and when those kids stand up, I'll ask, what's your score? And then I'll say, what was your first choice? And if their first choice is something like trombone or something like that, clearly it wasn't tuba. So what I'll usually do is if their tuba score was higher than their trombone score, then I'll just be like, look, let's be real, blah blah blah, whatever negotiations I have with kids to fill in those spots, I do it in front of everybody. Because by doing it in front of everybody, it takes away their negotiating power.
Wow.
And it sounds really rough to where you're gonna have like, kids didn't get what they wanted. They did. They put their top 3 choices. And I tell the kids beforehand, make sure you're really careful about, like I said, all 3 of your top 3 choices better be instruments that you are absolutely okay with playing. Like, it's okay if I pick tuba, and even though my first choice was trombone, it's okay that I got tuba because I wanted to play tuba. I put it on my list. I stress that hardcore for like 2 weeks as we're preparing for the fitting. Does that make sense?
That's something I should add to.
Yeah.
Don't put it on your list of 3 if you won't be happy playing it.
Exactly. And that's first, like I asked about your kind of terms of service talk. That's my terms of service talk, is whatever you put on there, you might get chosen for it. I said you're gonna get chosen for any one of those 3. So any one of those 3, you better be happy with playing. Because if you put it on there and then the universe just wills you to play the instrument, but you weren't happy with it, that's too bad, because you were warned.
Okay.
That scenario where it's a too bad scenario where the kid throws a hissy fit, in 7 years of doing the draft, 6 years I guess, in 6 years of doing the draft, I've only ever had 1 kid cry, and it's because they wanted to play trombone, but they got placed on euphonium.
Big whoop.
I know. I didn't really care. I needed an extra trombone anyway, so I just put him on trombone. I didn't care.
And yeah, you can never have too many trombones.
The scenario was his fault because he was being a goofer and didn't pay attention when I called trombones, so he missed out on the trombone spot. And I was like, all right, kid, it's fine.
I see.
So that's the only memorable contestation that I've ever had. Usually kids are happy with it because they got picked on they got drafted for one on the team of their top 3. I use the word team a lot, but they got drafted to their favorite team or one of their 3 favorite teams, and everyone's super happy. And I'll go down the list. So I'll do.
So do you use the scenario of like a professional sports draft where, Tom Brady, when he was first drafted, probably wanted to play for the Raiders or something, but he ended up getting picked for the Patriots?
Yeah.
And then he ended up being great?
Yeah, and kids talk about that all the time.
Okay.
Like I I always do it from class to class. Like there's a student who she's a sixth grader going to seventh grade. She's going into the top band next year, and she's a flute player, but she wanted to play trumpet. But she remembers but she also accepted very quickly. Okay, flute was the right choice. I really like flute, and she's a great flute player, and she loves it. And I'll tell those kids those examples, beforehand. So what I do is I do that per instrument. I always start with tubas first, which is why you always get jealous, because I always have 16 tuba beginners.
I don't get jealous.
Bro,
I don't get jealous. No.
No?
Right.
I thought you did. The first time I told you, you were like, damn. But like,
well, I mean, that may have been like my first year at Westglades. We didn't have that many.
Sure.
But I mean, the second year we got 14.
You got exactly what you wanted.
Yeah.
I dig it, but I always end up with the tubas I need, because I always do tubas first, and so every tuba spot gets picked up. The last section that I do every year is clarinets. Usually the second section that I'll do is the instrument that I need the most. So if I need a lot of horns, I'll do horns next, or if I need trumpets for whatever reason, I'll do trumpets next. I'll usually do most of the low brass first. And then probably the third or fourth will usually be the altos. And I remember from the fitting episode, I said that my rule is if you didn't get a 5 on alto, you don't stand. So alto is the only one where I don't say first choice. Alto, I say stand up if you got a 5. And then from there, we'll figure it out. Because usually kids know, I've never met a single student who didn't have a problem being selected for alto, even if they didn't get a 5.
So what if a kid put alto as their first choice but ended up standing because they put tuba as their second choice?
It depends on what they got.
They end up getting placed. So remind me again. So when let's say you don't have enough tubas that stand, then you ask, if you put it as your second choice, stand up. You get to a kid, you ask them first what their score was, or do you ask them what their first choice was?
When I have them stand up for round 2, I call them in my head second round picks.
Yeah.
But if they stand up, and I'll usually ask their score first. If they stand up and they're an alto, like their first choice was alto and they got a 5, if there's not other people standing, I'll let them sit down. I'll usually play the numbers. Like if I can see if there's a kid who's like, okay, this is gonna be a problem, but there's 3 other kids standing whose tuba is their second choice, I'll let that one kid sit down and I'll haggle with the others, and it always evens out. It just does, by testing it and just trusting the process. But yeah, so for alto, regardless of where it is in the order and in the lineup, I'll usually just say stand up if you got a 5, and then if I don't have enough 5s, then I'll say stand up if you got a 4+. And then for the 4+, I'll ask what their other instruments are, and either you sit down or you stand up, or you sit down or you stand up, or stay standing, and we'll haggle it out. Sometimes and because you're doing it based off first choice, not all of the selections are perfect. Like sometimes I might have to add a flute spot, or sometimes I might have to add a horn spot, or and then which means taking away another spot from somewhere else. But like it's always pretty close. Like if the trumpet percentage is 12%, then and I end up with 14%, or I end up with 10% or 12%, it's not a big deal. Like whatever.
Okay.
Because the idea is you get your balance as close as you can, but it's also you want the kids to be happy on their instruments, right? So, yes. And if they're I've never met and I tell the students, I've never met a single person who was really good at something and hated what they were doing. So like if you were really good at tuba, but it was your second choice because you're unsure, you're gonna be fine, because you're gonna be great. And when you're great, you'll fall in love with it, and that's always what happens.
Right.
So I'll go down the whole thing. I'll usually do clarinets last, because the clarinets are usually people who did really well on clarinets. I don't know why. I can't really explain that one. I got to pay attention this year and see how that, and be able to explain the science in another episode. But I always end up with a butt ton of clarinets, and it's usually because it's the alto dregs who got like a 4 or like a 4- on alto and learned, well, I didn't get a 5, so I'm just gonna go hard in clarinet.
So for us, it's gonna be the hand size kids.
Right.
They want to play saxophone so bad, but their hands are too small. So we'll say, well, sit on clarinet, and then if your hand size gets bigger, bass clarinet, or alto as a second instrument next year, or something like that.
Yeah, no, it works out fine.
So I'm listening to yours. It sounds great. I love the the Fox Sports thing, very similar to our Harry Potter thing. I feel like that might actually be even more exciting. And then it kind of
It's hilarious.
It promotes teamwork.
Yep.
When students are getting placed in our class, it's a very individual experience. And
It's so hype. My favorite parts are when the friends get chosen for the same instruments.
Right.
And even though they're friends, it's like, oh no, the friends have been chosen. They're all friends who all got really good scores. So not only are they going to be friends, they earned that spot.
That actually might be a good thing to add to our fitting questionnaire, or like do a separate questionnaire. Like, so who are you friends with in your class?
Mm-hmm.
Who do you like to talk to or sit next to in class?
Yeah, it's not a bad idea, and it's always funny because it's always the tubas. It's always the tubas, and like 2 years ago, they're not gonna be 8th graders, but 2 years ago there was like 3 boys who they were attached at the hip, and they all got chosen for tuba because they all got 4s and 5s, and they were like, yeah, dude. And because they all did well, they went one after another in the fitting, and they all watched each other do well, so they all picked tuba as their first choice. And for 3 years they have just referred to themselves as the tuba gang. That's just who they are. They're the TG, and they walk in like, TG, and I'm like, all right, go sit down.
Very nice.
No, it's fun, and I really do promote the teamwork aspect. Because I'm talking about, you want to be, hang out, like all the quarterbacks hang out with each other, all the defense, all the goalies on a soccer team, they all hang out with each other. They do drills together. If you're the tubas, you guys all you do your drills together. If you're the clarinets, you guys all practice your break drills together. Like, that's what we do. And then I pit the classes against each other as other teams. And then the fun part is whenever we have our like big beginning band recitals and concerts, we call it the All-Star team, because everybody comes together. But yeah, so it's that's the draft. You really do have to know your students, just like you, because you have to know which kids you will be able to haggle with and which kids you won't. You got to be really, really airtight with your management, as well as with if you're a good negotiator. Like if you can sell iceberg, if you can sell like ice to an Eskimo, then you know what I mean? If you can do that, the draft is for you, because you got to be able to sell your position and sell whatever the scenario is to that kid in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. To not allow them the chance to become a reclusive and retreat within themselves and not be responsive. Usually kids are really, really cool with it, because they don't want to be standing up for more than 5 seconds having everybody stare at them. They're not staring. Right. They're not staring in an intimidating way. Everybody's hyped, mm-hmm. but they're still 6th graders, so they're still gonna go, okay. And if there's any ever conversations that you have to have, usually those conversations will wait to the end of class. Students are never really. I don't in memory have students that are like crazy against the idea. They're usually really cool with it. If a student gets drafted to the wrong instrument because it's just not a good fit pedagogically, I'll usually make those changes in November or December.
Yeah, we actually keep track of what their second and third choice instrument in their summer listening survey scores. Mm-hmm. We keep that in a database the entire year. We reference that database all year, and it's for that very reason.
Yeah, usually I throw it out around like January, February, because by November, December, their embouchures have formed, and you can tell which kids can make them and which kids can't. So I usually throw it out about halfway through the year when I do my winter cleaning of my office. But I do hold on to that stuff as much as I can, because you'll find the trumpet players with PLP, or you'll find the flute players who they just can't control their airstream and air direction, and you make those changes as you need. It works out. I love it a lot. I've never had a year where I didn't have the tubas I wanted. I've never had a year where I didn't have where I've had like really bad instrumentation. It's usually when instrumentation drops out, it's because kids like my school is a transient school, so you'll have kids move, or what have you, but it works out, and like, so this year we were very trombone heavy, we weren't very flute heavy, so this past year, so I'm gonna be going hard on the flute selling in flute draft this year. Like I'm probably gonna do flutes either 4th or 5th, like real quick. I usually say flutes in like the high voices towards the end, but I'll probably put them way up in the spot.
Okay. So the only thing I can kind of see happening is a student playing an instrument they didn't get a 5 on. Or having a lot of second and third choice instruments.
Well, typically,
I would probably have to either watch somebody do a draft or do it myself to really understand.
Yeah.
But that's probably just for our listeners something to consider, maybe where your priorities are. So
yeah,
you know,
and it's like, for example, usually when you ask for if it was your first choice, most of the spots will stand up. So if I'll say like in a section of maybe 10 clarinets, I might have like spot 9 or 10 might be their second or third choice. Most people are cool with it. They're just like, oh yeah, no, and they can.
Okay.
I don't know why it balances out.
Earlier I asked you, what if you don't have enough? What do you do if you have too many?
Depends on the instrument. You know, if I have too many, and honestly, if you have too many, then that means that you have too many kids who've chosen that instrument and are happy with it.
So do you look at their choices before you do the draft? Because I feel like that could be beneficial to know, like a lot of kids put clarinet as their first choice. Like you have 10 spots, but 20 students put it as their first choice, and kind of know ahead of time, like this is probably one of the instruments that I need to ask last to kind of whittle down from 20 to closer to 10.
Yeah, and like I said, I review those cards beforehand. I won't have exact numbers, but I'll definitely it's just memory of like I remember seeing a lot of clarinets from this class, so I gotta be careful. Yeah, no, in the draft is super flexible because you make those calls as you see it. You do have to be very organized in your headspace, and you do need to have an idea of what kids chose and what kids are thinking and where their minds are at. But I don't know, like it just balances out. All the way I do it every year, it always balances out. If you have too many kids who are like, if I have too many flutes, that means I just have that many kids who are excited to play flute and their scores are okay. And that's not really a problem. It's just, you know what I mean? Like big whoop. I've got a lot of, because that's the thing is like, oh no, you got a lot of kids who are excited to play a certain instrument and they deserve it. Okay.
Right.
That's fine.
Right.
Yeah, like there are times where I'll be like, I'll have 7 trumpet spots, and I'm like, all right, if trumpet was your first choice, stand up, and like 9 will stand, and all of them got 4s or 5s, and I'm like, all right, that's fine. Like, okay.
Okay.
Not a big deal. I'll usually ask the 4s what their other choices were, and sometimes I'll make kids sit down or whatever, but it's rare. Most kids get chosen for their top instrument. Every student gets chosen on their top 3. Every single one. And everyone's okay with it, and everyone's super happy. And if there's any changes that need to be made, those usually happen in private with a parent. And if I'm not successful in selling it to that parent, then I got to go back to business school, which I never went to business school. But like,
I'd say for ours, we're like 90% first choice, and then the rest is second with a few sprinkled in third choices. And sometimes we try to have a discussion with the third choice. But what I'm thinking after listening to you go in depth with the draft, even though you and I have talked about it several times, it's taken me a while to wrap my head around it. But I think I understand and can conceptualize it now, at least on a base level. What I would like to take from yours is balancing out the instrumentation in the classes like you do. And so I know I initially said that, let's say I have 6 oboe spots and 6 of them are in first period. That means the second and third beginning periods won't have any oboes or something like that. Sometimes we'll have a student on an instrument by themselves in a particular period, simply because we go off of their first, second, third choice in their score and not by instrumentation. But I want to kind of work in the instrumentation, but probably in secret. So without the kids knowing that it's only going to be 4 tubas per class, for example, still place 4 tubas per class. Does that make sense?
Right.
Without them
absolutely.
Knowing. That could just be a little thing. I'll talk to Kaylin about it and kind of mull over. There was something else.
I like doing it out loud because it's, for me, a lot of my management, like a lot of people's management is and successful classroom management is psychological, and there's a psychology of urgency when they see the spots on the board. They're like, oh, shnikes, like, because like it's like they're like, oh, shnikes, I know I got a 4+ on trumpet, but like, and it's my first choice, but like how, like if there's only 7 spots, are there more than 7 5s? Like, what do I do? And there's a sense of urgency. It does create a little bit of anxiety, but it's never overwhelming. And by having that sense of urgency, that's where my negotiating power comes in, because I can use the time limit of the class, and I can use the number of spots available to push kids around as you need to, without sacrificing their first top 3 choices.
I actually did have to do this at one time on accident.
Right.
So that year we did a spring fitting. About 40 kids that signed up for band didn't come to any of the fittings that we hosted. And so we had to fit them anyway. And it took a week to fit them. And because we ended up fitting a lot of students, even though they had already been quote unquote selected on a specific instrument. The reason for that is because we ended up being short on certain instruments because some students went to the spring fitting. So I ended up putting the instrumentation on the board as if it were a draft for each section, right? And I put the section became white if we got the right number. A section became red if there was an urgent need to fill that spot.
Cool.
And then went green if there were too many. And so the kids are kind of watching and going and cheering each other on, like join our section. So that was actually a cool experience. It wasn't necessarily a draft, but it was like, hey, we need some students to retry because look, we need to do this. And so we had to really work as a team to get students on specific instruments, but it still ended up being their choice, which I really liked.
Yeah, it works out. I've seen other people do it other ways. And honestly, like, as long as you end up with a balance that you're happy with, and as long as you end up with students who are happy, not in that order, then
student experience first.
That's right. As long as you end up with students who are happy and you end up with a balance that you can live with, then just go forth, and go forward. What I would tell people not to do is do not, because this is the scenario where I end up with too many on one instrument. Do not put your balance needs over the happiness of a student, because it doesn't matter. What matters is making sure students are happy with music education. That's
very true. Like, you don't want to, I know that in my scenario it seemed like we were very instrumentation based, but on like I mentioned before, if we have a little extra or a little less, what I'm not going to do is have a section full of trombones that all got 3s, or half a section of trombones that are on 3s because we want trombones. I'm going to come up with another way to get students that want to play trombone. So that's not going to, the instrument placement. So basically what we're saying is the instrument placement doesn't need to be an end all be all final sentence for your instrumentation for the next 3+ years.
That's right.
It's just, this is how we initially get them engaged and excited and placed on an instrument. We have to come up with other ways to fill out our instrumentation to where the students are on board and it's their idea. It's what they choose to do.
That's right.
Because I've fallen into that trap before, and it just bit me in the ass because they all stayed on, let's just say trombone for example, but it's happened several times. But like, I'll put a bunch of kids on trombone, but it was like their third choice, or they got 3s on it or something like that. But I needed trombones. We had to have trombones, and I thought I could convince them over the course of a year that they would stay on trombone. Not really. Nope. It's really a miracle if you're able to do that. But all the kids are gonna think about every time they come into class is, damn it, I have to play the fucking trombone again.
That's right.
So
do
it later.
That's right. I agree. So yeah, is there anything else?
I think that's it, man. But yeah, I'm definitely gonna incorporate some of that.
Same.
For the
I like
instrumentation per class.
I like the preparation that you guys put into it, and just the organization and having as much information as in your head. I'm not the world's most organized human being.
Well, yeah,
I always appreciate that.
But it's not in our head though. We like I said, we have to put on a spreadsheet because just like you, like we can't keep everything in our head.
Right.
What's really in our head is how we interact with the students and our relationship with the students. I would say that's really important. Right. Is like knowing the student as well as possible, each individual student, because that's going to help you at the actual placement, you know, or when it comes to deciding the final placement, so quote unquote final. But everything else we had to put in a spreadsheet, but we really try to match their listening score to the scores on their sheet to the top 3 choices, basically.
You got it.
So
Sounds good.
yeah.
So yeah, anything else?
I think that's it. You got anything?
Nah, man, take us out.
All right. This has been the Florida Band Directors Podcast. We just finished talking about instrument placement, instrument draft for beginners. And one more happy burpity to Andrew Lopez. Happy birthday. Yeah.
Thanks, man.
And,
Next episode, we're going to be doing, actually showing you guys the episodes that we recorded while we were at the FBA Summer Conference.
Yes.
Yeah, those are good. So that'll be episodes 4 and 5, and then we'll be back with you guys in episode 6.
By the way, they
yeah.
emailed a survey for
Oh, I
Summer
saw it.
Conference. So
Oh,
if
I
you're
saw it.
listening and you haven't done the survey, and if it's still available, please go do the survey, because they're also surveying people that did not go.
If you didn't go,
Ian Schwinn
listen to our
talked about.
episodes.
Yeah.
Listen, and then take the survey, because we went to every session and we gave a pretty in-depth explanation. of what we
Almost
were
every
looking for.
session. Yeah. Almost every session.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, so let's go.
all right, buddy. We'll see everybody later. Peace out.
Thanks for listening to the Florida Band Podcast. Follow us on YouTube and contact us at flbandpodcast@gmail.com. Catch you next time.